Welcome to the Go Shout Love podcast. My name is Seth Carnell, and I'm the storyteller on the Go Shout Love team. There are many moments when receiving news of medical complications for your child that are pivotal and have a dramatic effect on your future. Occasionally, those moments require a decision from options brought to you by doctors and medical staff who are trying to prepare you. Those moments are amplified when you are having to make those decisions when it's time to deliver your child who has a complicated medical condition that you just found out about. Parents in these circumstances hear phrases like, prepare for the worst. If the baby makes it, this will be life-altering, poor quality of life. These parents are given options like, you can give birth in a way that is healthier for mom. You can give birth in a way that gives the baby the best chance. Today's episode includes a scenario like this with much more. We are talking to David and Erin, who have 3 girls, Lilia, Caroline, and young Maddy. Maddy has cerebral palsy and epilepsy. Although there were significant complications during Maddy's birth, she didn't receive these diagnoses until she was 1 for the cerebral palsy and 3 years old for the epilepsy. David and Erin will walk us through all of that and much more, including having 2 older girls and how to balance the attention that a child with a diagnosis needs versus those of growing kids who don't have major medical complications. Doesn't sound easy, but if the time we spent with them is any indication, David and Erin are knocking it out of the park. This is a very loving and fun family. It was a great pleasure meeting them and spending time hearing their story. With me in this interview is our co-director, Josh Veach. Please take a second to rate and review this podcast. And here is Josh.
We normally start by asking a question about personality of Maddy specifically, but we're going to try this a little bit differently. So, and I want you both to answer this. If Maddy were an animal, what kind of animal would she be and why?
Oh, that's a great question. What is the most independent animal you can think of? Because she's that one.
Okay.
Answer a question with a question. That's
that
perfect.
Is good. Yeah, strong in independence.
Yeah. I mean, she's incredibly independent. She's very strong-willed.
Yeah. I mean, we joke that she's like Hey from Moana.
Yeah, we do.
The little crazy chicken.
Oh.
Because she's so skinny and scrawny and kind of a little, quirky.
Sometimes aloof, sometimes a little
but
crazy.
But does her own thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So we nailed it. So she's a very specific chicken.
Yes.
She's not just any chicken.
No.
She's a special chicken.
Whatever a chicken hey is, that's what she is.
What does she love to do? What makes her happy?
She loves people. She really loves her peers at school, her sisters, her cousins. She really is a very social kid.
Mm-hmm. She loves going out.
Yep.
Anywhere. She loves her LOL dolls and toys. She loves the iPad.
She loves planning. What's next?
Yeah.
What's next? That's what we hear all the time.
Yeah. She always wants to know what tomorrow is and what we're doing next.
Mm-hmm.
She loves being around her Syracuse lacrosse teammates.
Yeah. Loves them.
She loves going to church.
Awesome. What about Maddy, Dad, makes you beam with pride?
I think it's her courage. She's endured so much already, been through so many medical procedures and had so many needles stuck into her and dealt with having seizures and just limitations and challenges, and yet she still has a lot of joy, and she's still very confident, believes in herself, and just seems to have a really good view on life and the world, and doesn't seem like she feels like she's at a disadvantage for the most part.
Mom, what about you?
Yeah, I think David said it really well, but she's so brave. I often have to take her for procedures and blood draws, and she'll say something to me like, I'm really nervous, Mom. But then when we get up there, she might cry, but then eventually she's sitting there brave, kind of like breathing through it. And I really beam with pride when she starts to figure things out on her own. Sitting up by herself was something she did, and it took a long time.
How old was she?
She might have been almost 3 when she figured out, I have a video somewhere, but she was laying on the ground and I went to go do something because she can't get away, and I don't say that to be mean, but it's a fact.
Sure.
Right.
She can't go that fast. So I came back to her bedroom and she was sitting up, and I just looked at her like, what happened? How'd you get from laying down to sitting up? So I've been with pride when I see her do things that I didn't even know was possible.
Yeah.
Was she smiling?
Oh, she knew immediately when I walked in. Huge smile on her face. She's laughing. She's like, look it.
Yeah. Anytime she uses her right hand to do something, because that's she doesn't have as much control over her right hand as her left hand. She always she knows it's special. She knows it's, she wants us to see her doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She's a fighter.
Oh yeah.
She is.
Yeah, she definitely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maddie's the youngest for you guys of 3 daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
And tell us a little bit about her siblings, and then kind of just share kind of give us a rundown of the relationship that she shares with her sisters.
Yeah, Lilia is 11. She's a 6th grader. She's an extrovert. She loves being around people. She's a leader. She likes planning and organizing things. She's very creative, great with drama, and loves sports, loves to play soccer and lacrosse, and she plays piano and drum. She just likes to do lots of different things. And Caroline is 8. She's a 3rd grader. She's got a very tender heart. She's more into crafts and baking, and she's an introvert. And she also does play some sports, but isn't into it as much as Lilia is. So, I mean, you can speak a little bit to the relationship.
Yeah, what's their dynamic?
Yeah, it's interesting because Lilia and Caroline have moments where they might fight, act like a typical, sister duo. But there's a tenderness that they have with Madeline that I think only comes with having a special needs sister. They're very careful with her. They're very sensitive to her needs. They fight for her. So if something doesn't go quite Maddie's way, they're quick to jump in. And it's incredible. I remember people asking early on, are they jealous? And I kind of was taken aback, and I thought to myself, I don't think they've ever been jealous of Maddie. Maddie gets a lot of attention. It's just the nature of having a wheelchair and being different. And they're just very sensitive, and they're very caring and loving, and it doesn't bother them that she gets more attention. But they're very sweet to her.
It's definitely affected the way they see the world too. When they're around other people with special needs. I remember one time we were in New York City, and some lady who, it was obvious she probably lives on the street or lives in some sort of environment that's not great, came into a restaurant we were eating in and asked for a piece of chicken, and we gave it to her, and then she walked over and threw it in the trash, and then came back and tried to talk to us. She just wasn't well. But, the girls were very engaged with what was happening. And I think after she left, they kind of, I forget the exact verbiage they used, but they tried to process that just like Maddie has challenges physically, she has challenges inside of her, And so for them, it wasn't just like weird, crazy, strange. It was like understanding, like there's something not quite working inside of that lady. And it makes them a little more compassionate, I think, and empathetic to people.
Yeah, that's not a natural place to land, especially. Even adults struggle with that piece, but for your daughters to get there, that speaks a lot of them as individuals, but also as you guys as parents. That's awesome. That's powerful. You mentioned the question that you were asked about: do they ever get jealous?
Yeah.
And as parents and doing all of the necessities that like you said, it comes with a little bit more time requirements, just day-to-day life, to make sure that she's cared for in the way that she needs to be cared for. Was that a concern for you guys at any point, or how did you manage that tension?
I don't think I knew that it was a tension in the beginning. We didn't know exactly what Maddie's needs would be. We were told that they'd be significant, but we didn't know what kind of needs she'd have. So I think it honestly was just kind of navigating as we went. I I don't know. Maybe you can speak to that a little more. I'm not really sure. I don't know what to pinpoint it on. You know what I mean?
I don't know that we've been overly intentional about it. I think we probably got some advice along the way that this can happen. I know Erin bears the brunt of the regular care more so than I do because she's home with Maddy, especially before Maddy went off to school. And we were warned by friends who raise children, specifically actually with cerebral palsy, that there can become a really unhealthy codependency between the caregiver and the child to the point where they kind of end up on some level bitter towards each other because the child can't function without the mom and the mom can't do things without the child. But I think I don't know if we've figured it out exactly, but we're pretty intentional. I would say the one thing we are intentional about is making sure that the two older girls have all the opportunities they would normally have. Yeah. And that we deal with the challenges of going to their stuff with Maddy. And it's not easy, when it's hardest on Erin because sometimes, like with soccer, I help coach, so I'm not even on the sidelines. But Maddy can't walk, and so she always wants to be walked. So that obviously doesn't work when you're trying to watch a sporting event. And her wheelchair and her walker can't always go into those places. Right. So, but I think we've been careful to provide all the opportunities we can to the girls to be present with them individually, whether it's one-on-one little daddy date, mommy date, and just to make sure that we're really, I think, while we've not been intentional about it, I think just kind of intuitively we've known all the girls need our attention in unique ways.
Yeah. I want to jump back to kind of like just the beginning of your story, especially at, finding out you're pregnant and Maddy coming into your family. What did that look like? Tell us about Maddy joining your family, about her diagnosis, and kind of what that journey was like.
We were really excited. We had 2 girls already, so we were pretty prepared for another one. And up until 18 weeks, I should say at 18 weeks, we had a normal ultrasound. So up until we had her at 27 weeks, we actually didn't know that there was anything wrong. We were all very excited, and I started developing symptoms of preeclampsia, which is high blood pressure in pregnancy. And that is when it landed me in the hospital. I ended up in the ER with some pretty concerning symptoms, and that's when we started to find out that there were issues with Madeline as well, that we didn't know were there. So we started finding out little things here and there. One thing in particular I'll never forget was getting an ultrasound done, and at this time we had no idea that there was something wrong. But we knew that she was showing signs of distress. So the doctor walks in, and he sat down right next to my bed and said, we think we know what's wrong with your daughter. And that's, I think, a moment when we realized it wasn't just me that was having issues.
Yeah. Had to be a stomach drop kind of moment.
It was very shocking because up until then I had a healthy pregnancy. Right. The tests were all normal.
We were prepared for a preemie at that point because they had basically said, you're going to have to deliver this baby because, with preeclampsia, the only way to help the mom is to deliver the baby. So we were prepared for that. They'd given us all this sort of encouraging statistics on babies born at 27 weeks. And that was the next morning that they did the sonogram to make sure the fluids were fine. And that's when they came back and said, there's a large mass on your baby's brain. We don't know if it's a bleed. We don't know if it's a tumor. But at that point, they needed to transfer us to a different hospital that has a NICU that would be able to better serve our family after Maddy was born. So that was when everything that was actually the day Maddy was born via emergency C-section. But that day was very traumatic, I think, and emotional.
On the same day that you're told that they found a mass on the brain.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and then we get to the other hospital, and of course, doctors are just doing their job, trying to make sure we know what we're headed into realistically. And they prepared us for stillborn, deformed head, ruptured head. We had to have the whole DNR conversation before we went into the emergency room for the C-section. So this all happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
So you went from everything feels like the same as your older 2 daughters to you have no idea what to expect within a matter
It was
day
a
or
week.
two?
Yeah. I started having symptoms, and within a week, it landed me in the hospital.
Symptoms were the tricky thing with the symptoms were they were kind of like normal pregnancy symptoms,
Right.
like swelling,
little swelling, shoes not fitting.
Yeah.
So you kind of
feel
going,
great.
yeah, she wasn't feeling awesome, but like that's all kind of part of the deal,
Right.
But I remember that day because Maddy was born on the 11th.
Yeah.
On the 10th, I was in Binghamton, about an hour and 15 minutes away from where we live, and I drove home from some meetings that day. I remember walking into this door and seeing you, and immediately I was like, we gotta go to the hospital. Like, she was so swollen, bloodshot. I mean, she'd been thrown up.
Wow.
And I just was like, something is really, really wrong.
That's when I knew I looked awesome.
Yeah, she doesn't want pictures of that. So that's when we went in. That's when they did blood test, found out she was in preeclampsia, and so that kind of started the whole ball rolling. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So they go into emergency C-section.
Yes.
And you have no idea what to expect. They've prepared you for the worst. Then what happens?
So they use phrases like, if the baby makes it, if she comes out alive. They said, let's just take it one step at a time.
And before we went in, they tried to give us some options. So
Yeah.
they tried to say to Erin, we can induce labor and you can give birth naturally, which is kind of best for the body of the mom.
Yeah.
But
they really encouraged that one.
But they basically described it to us as you'll drown your child because the child's not, I forget all the medical reasons why, but the baby would just be repeatedly sort of submerged in fluid and would not survive. The second option was to wait, but she was very sick, like and showing no signs of getting better. Mm-hmm. And then the third option was the emergency C-section, which obviously they presented it. I don't think it was necessarily their preferred option. I can't speak for all of them, but for a couple of them, it was pretty clear it wasn't their preferred option because I'm not sure they thought it was best for Erin.
I think they also looked at our young family thinking, your life is about to change. And I think they tried to help us understand how life altering it would be. In fact, that's a phrase they used, is life altering.
Yeah.
They talked about her quality of life. It's going to be so poor. They really wanted us to think of all of the options. And in the moment, because they presented the C-section like it was not a great option, I felt guilty. Like, I told David, I'm sorry that I'm choosing this. And I think he looked at me like, why do you feel sorry? This was...
Yeah, we being my parents and your mom, we were all kind of there. And we really wanted Erin to voice her decision, her preference. But as soon as she did, we all were like, that's what we think too.
I think they all breathed a sigh of relief.
Yeah, it was pretty unanimous feel in the room of like, this is what we need to do. We felt like it was the best chance for Maddy and for Erin.
Yeah.
So then we go into the room. I'm sitting with Erin. They do the C-section. I hear Maddy cry, and
such a beautiful sound.
The doctor who has her back to us has Maddy in this little incubator thing, and starts saying things like her head looks okay. She's pinking up, and I went over and actually took some pictures and then they just had to get her straight to the NICU. So I mean, you saw her maybe.
Barely.
Like you saw her kind of getting pushed by, but you didn't obviously get to hold her or anything like that. And then she went straight upstairs to the NICU.
So in that moment, are you subconsciously like checking off the boxes of the worst case scenarios of like, they've prepared us for this, and I hear her cry.
Yeah.
Like, so
she's breathing. She's alive.
Here. And
she's not white as a sheet. They said that she might come out white as a sheet. Her head looked normal. She was just so tiny. She was, 2 pounds, 1.5 ounces. So,
I think it was the first moment that I actually felt some hope after all of that. The doctors gave us such poor, terrible options that it was a glimmer of hope to hear her cry and to hear them say she's pinking up.
Yeah. And they don't want to give you false hope.
No.
I get it. You know what I mean?
They've been trained for that.
They've been trained to kind of say like, this is what you could be looking at, because the last thing they want is a patient to come back and say, you said this and it was worse. So they'd rather err on the other side. So I get it.
We totally understood.
But it certainly kind of shapes your expectations going in.
If you are new to Go Shout Love, it would probably be good for me to tell you who we are and what we do. We try to do amazing things for amazing families with kids on rare medical journeys. And each month, we shout love for families through the sale of creative apparel inspired by the kiddo. This month's design is inspired by Maddy. The amazingly made t-shirt design reminds us that every life is beautiful. Visit our website at GoShout.love to support Maddy through the purchase of a t-shirt, hoodie, tumbler, hat, or other items, and every item sold in March will be used to help replace the deck in their backyard with a patio and ramp that is easy for Maddy to navigate. You can also start a subscription in Shout Love every month for our featured family or families. If you do, use the discount code PODCAST at checkout to get $5 off your first month. In part 2 of this conversation, we talk about inclusion and support, topics that I don't think I could stress enough, on how beneficial it is to learn from families like this, on how to approach kids on rare medical journeys and their families.
Tell us a little bit about her diagnosis and kind of at what point you were able to get that, the steps that led to that.
So first, she, because of her head trauma, they ended up finding out that the mass on the left side of her brain was a brain bleed, which we found out, I guess, doesn't happen often before birth. It happens to preemies after.
Yeah, it's unusual in utero.
Yes. So that happened in utero, which also led to her having hydrocephalus. So she started having head swelling. We have a couple pictures where the poor thing looks like a little bit like an alien.
The light bulb.
Yeah. Her head just kept swelling, so they'd have to do spinal taps. We lost count of how many spinal taps they ended up doing. And then the NICU stay is pretty traumatic too. So in the NICU, she only was diagnosed with hydrocephalus. I think that was the only one.
On the grade 4 brain hemorrhage.
Yes. Yeah. So she stayed in the NICU for 79 days. At 70 days, she got a VP shunt, and that's put under the skin on the head. The tubing goes behind the ear. It's under the skin, goes into the abdomen, and drains all the fluid into the abdomen. And so she was sent home on that, and that would fill up with fluid, so we had to keep her upright. She also didn't eat super great, so I'm pumping, and we have to feed her with a bottle, and also make sure that she's upright, not the fluid's not collecting in the scar tissue. And that was pretty scary to go home with this very fragile baby.
She was just like 4 pounds when we took her home.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of restless nights in there.
Oh my goodness, yes. In fact, we had shifts. So one of us would take the late night shift, the morning shift, and we would feed her, keep her upright so that she didn't fill with fluid and stuff. So she actually didn't get diagnosed with anything else, I think, until about 1, when she was diagnosed with cerebral palsy.
Mm-hmm.
Why does that take so long?
That's a great question. I think it's because of certain things that they look for. One thing that they're looking for is that they're not meeting milestones. So, a 6-month-old should be able to roll over, sit up, start to crawl. That she wasn't meeting those milestones. I've never heard of a kid being diagnosed with cerebral palsy before age 1.
They probably knew.
I think
they probably would have made an educated guess that this was going to be her diagnosis, but they don't like to diagnose until they have some hard evidence.
Sure. Yeah.
And it was almost like, oh, by the way, she has cerebral palsy. And we were like, huh? Oh, okay. That was kind of a punch in the gut. Mm-hmm. We didn't really see that one coming. Although I think looking back, we should have, if I had done a little more research.
Well, when she was very little and we talked to the neurologist for the first time, Dr. E, that's what I remember. It's a really long name, but
crazy.
He just said to us, he's like, there's no way of knowing, she could be basically in a vegetative state for her entire life, or she could be a college graduate. Wow. He said the spectrum is so broad and there's no way they can tell at that age, but something about the brain when they're that little has, I forget if it's plasticity or elasticity or some word like that allows the brain to transfer traditional functions when it's from one part of the brain to another part of the brain when it's under threat. So
they call it making new pathways.
Yeah, it's kind of like rewiring itself.
Yeah. So the part of Maddie's brain that was most damaged was really she shouldn't be verbal. That's where all that comes from for the rest of us.
It's fine gross motor and verbal.
It's coming from somewhere else for her, in her brain. So, but they don't know. They can't tell when the baby's that little where she's at and what the expectations should be. Yeah.
So getting that diagnosis of CP, how familiar were you with that? And did it hit you'd already kind of, I guess, been dealing with some of the life-altering things. The day-to-day life was a little bit different than what you had planned for an experience with your other two daughters, but you said that was kind of a gut punch.
Yeah, I think because of just having some experience with people we knew with cerebral palsy.
So you were familiar
Yeah.
with
Yes.
it. Okay.
I grew up with a friend at church who has cerebral palsy.
Yeah,
So I knew exactly what it looked like. However, cerebral palsy is on a spectrum.
yeah,
So it can be all the way on one end, you wouldn't even know somebody has CP unless you shook their hand and felt that it was weaker.
or they had a limp or something.
To the other extreme where none of the appendages are really controlled or functionable, and
Right.
they need everything done. So we knew Maddy at that point. We knew Maddy was somewhere on that spectrum, but we
Right.
still didn't know where on that spectrum.
Yeah.
And the man he grew up with is incredible.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know,
he got married. He's got a job. He's
amazing.
Great guy.
But I think when you realize all of a sudden life looks so different as a mom, it was a gut punch, but it also was like, okay, what's next?
Right.
I always kind of joke and say, bring it on. Like, what's next? Just another diagnosis? Okay, lay it on me. So I didn't have that mentality at that point, and it was really difficult to come to grips with. It took me a while to really come to terms with the fact that she was going to be dependent on us for a long time, probably for life.
There are, as kids grow, I think there are, families that haven't gone down that journey, or, they don't have to deal with extra equipment, or, go into the store, run into the soccer game. All those things are not, life just isn't, it's different. They've never had to think in those terms. And I think if you haven't been in that, there's a tendency to kind of take for granted those milestones that you talked about. What are some of the milestones that you've celebrated with Maddy? That when you look back, like you mentioned,
Like
earlier,
the sitting up.
the things that
that was a big one.
the things that she couldn't do, or you didn't think, you weren't sure were possible. Like, what are some of those milestones?
Talking was one, because like David said, the part of her brain that was damaged was verbal. And so we didn't know if she was going to be able to speak. So her first word was actually hey, which should have been an indication to us that she's hysterical.
Yeah.
So that was her first word. That was, I think, a really exciting moment to realize like she's getting it. She understands us and she's replying. That was exciting though. I mean, sitting up, I was elated, and I made her do it like 3 more times until her poor body was exhausted and she couldn't do it anymore. When she uses her right hand, she gets excited, and we do too, because the more you use a body part, you're building up those muscles,
Right.
and it's so hard for her. So when we watch her struggle to use that right arm, but really get it, I think that's a really exciting milestone as well.
Yeah.
Do you have any other ones?
I don't think so. I mean, alphabet, knowing her
Yeah.
alphabet, and just kind of the sort of stuff that, like you said, you just take for granted. Like, you don't celebrate a kid normally. I mean, I guess everybody celebrates what kids do, but it's a bigger deal when you're like, you don't know if she's ever going to be able
Right.
to do that.
When it's not necessarily, it's an unknown versus an
Yes,
expectation.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just kind of like, a little more special.
Yeah.
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 Now, along those lines, Maddy just started school.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, she started kindergarten this past fall.
She did pre-K for 3 or 2 years.
Yeah.
So what's that journey been like?
It was interesting. So she, I wanted to homeschool her forever, pretend or put her in that protective bubble and never let her leave. But we realized pretty quickly that I couldn't do everything, and the therapists are so awesome. So we started with a half-day preschool. I think it was 5 days a week. That was a lot. And even that, her stamina, she really didn't have the energy that the other kids did. So I'm glad that we did it the way that we did. And the preschool was amazing. They are just so wonderful. So she did that for 2 years. And then the other big step was kindergarten, because that's all day. That was a tough one too. But I think we've been really blessed to have really good staff at these schools. We're in an incredible area. I've gone to CPSE meetings or IEP meetings, and I don't go in with a binder. I don't go in with things that I have to fight for, which I know is the case for a lot of special needs parents. And I'm really grateful that I walk in knowing that she's going to get what she needs.
It's like you're walking into a room full of advocates that are on your side
Absolutely.
already, versus having to like step in and fight it yourself.
We haven't had to fight for anything. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Were you more nervous, or were you more like that, bring it on? mentality.
I was nervous.
Do you think were you more scared for the first day of school than she was?
Oh, I'm sure I was. She was really excited. She cried a little bit
Yeah.
for kindergarten or for preschool, but kindergarten she walked in like
Let's
she
do
already
this.
owned the place.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So I was very nervous. In fact, I don't really this is terrible, but I don't cry a ton. But I remember like the days that I would leave her in preschool and she would cry, I would be like, oh, that's such a, it's a sad day. But the day I bawled my eyes out was the day I walked in. I brought her to her classroom and she looked at me with like these sad little eyes, almost started to cry, but kind of breathed herself through it like she's being brave. I lost it on the way out.
Yeah.
So I think it was much harder on me than it was for her.
I know that before this, you've talked about the importance of inclusion and how that's just kind of become a passion. And one of the things you mentioned is that you can even like pinpoint, like when you see other kids,
Yeah.
like whether or not they've kind of been in an environment of inclusivity.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see that helps you determine like they get it or they've been around it or not?
There's a sensitivity that kids have. In fact, there was one time recently we're at a soccer game and we had some kind of like downtime in between one game to another. And we get Maddy's walker out. And what happens often is kids don't know what she's in. They don't know why she can't walk. And their parents tell them, don't stare, don't look. And so they kind of do this little eyeball like, what is that? But I'm not supposed to look. So they kind of look away quickly. And what I notice for kids that have been in an inclusive classroom is they come right up to Madeline. They're not scared. They're not like, they're curious, of course, but there's a sensitivity that they have that's obvious to me. Maybe not to everyone, but it's pretty obvious to me that they've been in an inclusive classroom.
So it's like they've naturally just been around it.
Yeah.
They haven't been, someone has fostered the curiosity
Yes.
and kind of given them a pathway to engage versus the don't stare,
Right.
steer clear. What would you say to parents who haven't been on a similar journey but want to encourage their kids? They want their kids to be the type of kids that naturally engage. What can they do? What are the right kind of questions to ask?
One of the things I even tell my girls is just go up and say hi. Even if a child is nonverbal, they're going to light up when you say hi. So just go up and say hi. The kids that come up to Madeline, I had one mom bring her daughter up and say hi to Maddy. The girl didn't even want to talk. She was very shy because Maddy was in her wheelchair. But to me, it didn't matter. I don't care if they ask a question that seems rude. I don't care if they are staring. It doesn't bother me. It actually is more hurtful when they tell their kids to look away and don't interact, because the only thing Maddy wants is that interaction with her peers. So I would encourage them to just go up and say hi. You don't have to say anything else. Just be like, hey, how's your day going? We noticed your son. He's so handsome. We noticed your daughter. She's so cute. And then go on with your day.
A kid is a kid, and they want to feel
Yeah,
like a kid, and
absolutely.
that happens when you have interactions with kids.
Yeah. So that would be my encouragement, is just say hi. That's it. It doesn't have to be complicated.
Earlier, we were talking about kind of some of the things that Maddy has taught you guys. And David, you're a pastor, and so one of the things that you mentioned was I forget exactly what you said, but you really talked about how it's impacted your faith a little bit. Can you share a little bit about that and kind of what you meant by that?
Yeah, I think, every challenging season of life and the circumstances that are difficult, they reveal things to us about ourselves, how we view the world. They have a way of unearthing what you actually believe. As someone who's been trained to serve in a local church, I have all sorts of theoretical, confessional theology. But then, the gap between confessional theology and functional theology gets really exposed when you suffer, when you struggle, when life doesn't go your way. And so I think with Maddy, we're always learning to trust God in new ways. And just to learn what it means to rest in his kindness, his plan, his sovereignty, his work, and to just genuinely believe that Maddy bears the image of God just as much as an able-bodied child does, just differently, just in a unique way.
Yeah.
And, without her, we would be missing some aspect of even the character and nature of who God is. So,
Right.
so I think that's one way that she's helped us. She definitely we have a lot to pray about with her too, so it kind of reminds us of how dependent we are upon God.
Yeah, that's good. A common theme that we hear from families is just how important support is, and having some call it a tribe or a community of some sort, whether it's family or neighbors or school or church or whatever.
Yeah.
How have you guys experienced a sense of community or support in your journey?
I mean, I think we have a riches of community. We have all our family is in the area. Erin comes from a large family. She has 10 siblings, and they're all within an hour of here. My family all lives within 10 minutes of here.
Wait, how many siblings?
She has 10.
10?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I misheard that, but sorry.
No, you didn't.
Yeah, no, 10. And then, we have a lot of great friends. We've lived in this community for almost our whole lives. So you just have that longevity of forge you lifelong relationships and friendships. And so between church and then some of my leadership roles across the state of New York and even traveling around the country and speaking at different things just broadens your influence and your circle and people who are part of our story. So when Maddy was born, I was just in a season of doing some writing and traveling and speaking, and so people from all over the country were hearing her story when I would speak at conferences and stuff, and they would follow on social media and just kind of lean in. And when we needed prayer, we just felt this tremendous support of prayer. So there's that. And then Erin's already referenced the school and the therapists and the county and the resources that are available there. And I think I mentioned earlier, Maddy's through another organization called Team Impact has been able to be a part of the Syracuse University women's lacrosse team, which has been a really neat connection in the community, and we've had some wonderful relationships develop out of that.
Yeah, I read up a little bit on that, and it's like she's become a little bit of a celebrity, it feels like. with that team.
That's an incredible...
She does think she is.
She says sometimes, I'm famous.
Yeah. We didn't realize how big of a deal it would be when we said yes to it. All the local news stations covered her signing.
Yeah.
They had an official letter of intent signing for her where she joined the team, and she's got a locker and she's on the field before the games with them.
She has
and
her own jersey.
She has her own jersey,
Yeah.
and it's been amazing to be a part of that community. And so that's just one more layer. I think when it comes to support, you just want to create as many layers of support as you can.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of them.
And so she gets to be part of that team all season long.
Yeah, and it's a 2-year program.
Oh,
so
my goodness.
Last year, and this will be her last year. Oops, sorry.
Yeah, she goes to all the games. She goes in the locker room before the games, even team events and stuff. And
That is so neat.
Yeah, she's very involved with them.
I think is the last question. How has social media impacted Maddy's journey in positive and or negative ways?
Honestly, I'll say it's only really been positive. We get a random negative comment here or there, but I made her Instagram a little over a year ago just thinking, what the heck? I'd love to connect with other families that have kids that have cerebral palsy or any disability, really. Just kind of see what's out there. And the network of people that have come around us, encouraging us, people that we've been able to connect with, it's been amazing. I mean, her Instagram is aptly named Amazingly Maddy, because I'll just say to him, this is amazing. So for me, I feel like it's all been really positive.
Is it sometimes hard to accept that kind of support? Or has it been humbling? Has it been...
I think humbling is a good word, actually. I feel so honored all the time when people will repost something of hers.
Yeah.
Some pretty... You're making me nervous. She likes to say that a lot. Yeah, it's humbling. I just am so honored to be a part of a community of people that's so incredible, connecting with people that are going through the same thing. But yeah, I think humbling is a great word.
It's so important to hear situations and stories like that. You hear so much negativity, and sometimes you lose your faith in humanity. And then you hear people surrounding kids like Maddy.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, that's good. That feels good.
Yeah. I even had a message recently within the last couple months of a woman who said, my son was just diagnosed with cerebral palsy and I didn't know what life would look like for him. And so she just said, watching your daughter on Instagram has been so encouraging to see what life could be like. And I think that just makes all the difference.
It's like that moment you referenced that you had hope for the first time in a while.
Yes, that little glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
That's all you need, honestly, to just kind of be able to get through a day sometimes.
Right. And I think from the medical perspective, from what we hear is kind of a common theme, is that rightfully their focus is the medical. Like their focus is what's going on in the body and how what may or may not play out. But you connect with those other parents and they're able to share with you the joys. Like it's not about the actual details of the body. It's about the person. It's about the value of that person and all the joy they bring to the world and all these other things. And doctors, the medical field can't help you see that side of things, but to see other parents share their stories and just the everyday life of not that it makes, there's still hard times, no doubt, but there's joy to be found. And I think that's one of the things that we see in all of these stories is that these are families that they get to embrace life in ways that they didn't know was possible. Yeah. Still challenging, still comes with struggles, still comes with stretching and all those other things, but
it also comes with growth.
Yeah, it doesn't take away the blessing of it. It doesn't take away the joy of it. Yeah. So it's really cool to hear you share that. And I know that you guys sharing your story with our community and anybody who's going to come across it will feel that same way. So
thank you for listening. We have some great conversations coming up soon on our podcast. Please keep listening and tuning in to this podcast and share with your friends and family. And hopefully we can bless some people who may need to hear these encouraging and authentic stories. Also, if you want to shout love for Maddy or for our featured families in coming months, please check out our website, goshout.love. Shop around, start a subscription with the discount code podcast, and then go shout love. Thank you.